The most powerful woman at Ironvale Systems just signed away 300 jobs with a single stroke of her pen. And 4 hours later, her car died on a frozen road in the middle of a blizzard, with no one coming to save her except one of the very men she'd nearly destroyed. She didn't know his name yet. She didn't know that the stranger driving through the whiteout to reach her had buried his wife, was raising a little girl alone, and had every reason in the world to leave her there. Stay with me to the end of this story. And if it moves you even a little, hit like and tell me in the comments what city you're watching from, so I can see how far this story has traveled. The pen ran out of ink halfway through her signature. Victoria Hale stared at the half-formed loop of the E in Hale, at the way it just stopped, a dry scratch dragging across the bottom of the authorization form, and for a moment she didn't move. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Ironvale Executive Suite, the early dark of a Minnesota December had already swallowed the parking lot lights below, turning them into a row of dim orange smudges in a sky that was beginning to spit snow. She set the dead pen down, picked up another from the lacquered tray Dorothy kept stocked, finished the signature. The new pen wrote smooth and black, and there it was, her name, complete, sitting at the bottom of a document that would, by Monday morning, end the employment of 312 people. "That's the last one," said Marcus Pell, from the chair across her desk. He was the CFO, 58, with the kind of soft, expensive tan that men got from golfing in places other people only flew over. He'd been pushing this list for 2 months. "I'll have legal start the notifications first thing Monday. Clean break. By Q1, the burn rate looks human again." 312, Victoria said. 312. Yeah. Marcus didn't even glance up from his phone. "We talked about this. The Duluth fab alone is bleeding us out. You keep it open one more quarter, the board starts asking who's running this place." Who's running this place? It was the kind of thing men said to her in rooms like this, dressed up as concern, and she had learned a long time ago not to flinch at it. She was 30 years old. She had been CEO of Ironvale Systems for 14 months. There were people in this building older than her father who still called her the kid in the elevators when they thought the doors had closed. "I read it," she said. "I signed it. You don't have to sell it to me twice." Marcus held up both hands, a little theatrical surrender. "Just making sure we're aligned. We're aligned." He stood, buttoned his jacket, and on his way out, he said the thing he always said, the thing that made her want to throw the dead pen at the back of his head. "You did the right thing, Victoria. It's never easy. But you did the right thing." The door clicked shut behind him. She stayed at the desk a long time after that, watching the snow thicken against the glass. "So, the thing nobody told you about being the person who signs the paper is that nobody tells you anything after." There was no one to call. Her mother had been dead for 6 years. Her father lived in Scottsdale with a new wife and a putting green and had stopped returning her calls around the time she'd taken the Ironvale job, because in his mind, a daughter who ran a company was a daughter who'd stopped needing a father, and he had quietly, bitterly agreed to be unneeded. She'd dated a man named Theo for almost 2 years, a litigator. He'd left in March. "You're not cold," he'd said, packing a duffel bag with the brisk efficiency of a man who'd planned the speech in the shower. "You just decided a long time ago that needing things was a weakness, and now you can't turn it off." She'd wanted to argue. She'd stood in the doorway of her own bedroom with her arms crossed and said nothing, because the worst part of cruelty is when it's also true. So there was no one to call. There was the apartment downtown, glass and steel, where the cleaning service came on Tuesdays, and the refrigerator held sparkling water and a bottle of wine she never opened. There was the gym at 5 a.m. There was this building. She gathered her coat, cashmere charcoal, $3,000, and her bag, and rode the elevator down 40 floors in silence. The parking garage was nearly empty. Her car, a silver German thing that cost more than most of the people she'd just laid off would earn in 2 years, sat alone under a flickering fluorescent tube. She got in. The engine turned over with that low, expensive purr. The dash glowed. Outside temp, 9 degrees Fahrenheit. A little snowflake symbol blinked on, the car's polite way of telling her what she already knew. She had a house in the country. That was the thing she didn't tell people, the thing that didn't fit the profile of Victoria Hale, ice queen of the 40th floor. An hour and a half north of the city, near the edge of nothing, There was an old lake house she'd bought 18 months ago and visited maybe 4 times. It had a stone fireplace and a dock that sagged into the water and a kitchen that still had the previous owner's avocado green appliances. She'd bought it on an impulse she'd never fully understood, signed the papers, and then found she couldn't bring herself to go, because going meant being alone somewhere that wasn't an office, and alone in an office at least looked like ambition. But tonight she didn't want the glass apartment. She didn't want the sparkling water. She wanted to drive until the city was aglow in the rearview mirror and then nothing at all. And she told herself the storm wasn't that bad. The plows would be out. She'd be at the lake house by 9 with a fire going. She pulled out of the garage into the white. 40 minutes north, the snow stopped being weather and started being a fact about the world. The highway thinned to 2 lanes, then to one set of tire tracks slowly filling in. The radio crackled a winter storm warning in a flat, automated voice, then lost the signal entirely. Her headlights caught nothing but a churning wall of white, flakes coming straight at the windshield like static, like the screen of a dead television. The car's traction system clicked and shuddered every few seconds, fighting for the road. She should have turned around. She knew it the way you know things too late, in the body before the brain. But turning around meant admitting she'd been wrong to leave. And admitting she'd been wrong was a muscle she'd let go soft. The county road was where it went bad. She'd taken the exit on instinct, the shortcut she half remembered from a summer drive. The county road had no plow and no lights and no other cars. Just a black ribbon under 6 inches of fresh snow, walled on both sides by pines that bent and groaned in the wind. The car slowed to 20, 15. The wipers couldn't keep up, and then, going up a slight grade with the engine straining, something under the hood gave a sharp metallic cough, and the dashboard bloomed with a constellation of amber warning lights, and the heat, the lovely, expensive heat, sighed and went cold. The engine died. She coasted, brakeless feeling though the brakes still worked, drifting to the shoulder, the tires crunching into the deeper snow at the edge until the car settled at a tilt and stopped. The wipers froze mid-arc. The headlights dimmed to a weak yellow, and then the dash went dark too. Just the faint glow of the hazard lights ticking, throwing red across the snow. For a second, Victoria sat very still and did the thing she was good at, which was refusing to panic. Okay. It's a car. It's a problem. Problems get solved. She pulled out her phone. 1 bar, then none, then 1. She held it up near the window and watched the signal flicker like a candle in a draft. She called roadside assistance and got 3 rings and a deadline. She called again. Nothing. She tried 911 and it connected. A dispatcher's voice, fuzzy, "What's your emergency?" And she got out 2 sentences, "My car broke down. I'm on a county road north of," before the call dropped and wouldn't come back. The cold was already finding its way in. Without the engine, the car was just a metal box, and metal boxes do not stay warm. She could feel it coming up through the seat, through the soles of her good leather boots that had never once in their life been meant for snow. She had a coat. She had no gloves, no hat, no blanket, no emergency kit, because the car was 8 months old and she'd never imagined needing one. There was a half bottle of water in the cup holder, already going slushy. She tried the phone again. The screen said no service, and then the screen, low on battery from a full day, dimmed itself to save power, and she watched her own pale reflection appear faintly in the dark glass, lit red by the hazards. That was when she allowed herself, briefly, to be afraid. The call came in to Ethan Cole's phone at 7:52 p.m. He almost didn't hear it over the noise of his own life. Lily had decided that bath time was a negotiation rather than a fact, and she was conducting that negotiation from the top of the stairs, wrapped in a towel printed with cartoon sharks, while Ethan stood at the bottom holding a hairbrush and the specific exhaustion of a single father at the end of a 12-hour day. "I don't need a bath," Lily announced. "I'm not even dirty. Smell me." "I'm not going to smell you." "Smell me. I'm clean. Bug, you painted with actual paint today. There's purple in your ear." "That's not paint, that's..." She searched, 5 years old and already a born lawyer. "That's a bruise. It's a purple bruise, in the exact shape of paint." The phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. He glanced at it. Unknown number, localish area code. He'd been dodging unknown numbers all week, ever since the rumors started about the layoffs, because half of them were debt collectors, and the other half were guys from the floor calling to ask if he'd heard anything. And he hadn't, and there was nothing worse than saying, "I don't know," to a man with 3 kids and a mortgage. But something made him pick up. Maybe just the habit of a man who'd learned the hard way that the call you ignore is the one that mattered. Hello? Static. Wind. A voice surfacing through it, clipped, controlled, but with something underneath the control that he recognized instantly because he'd heard it in his own voice once, in the worst phone call of his life. Hello, can you hear me? My car is broken down. I'm stranded on a road and I can't. The signal warped. The only number that would connect, I don't even know whose. Hey, slow down, I can hear you. Where are you? I don't know, north. There was a county road. I took the exit past the wind ate the rest. Ethan was already moving. He pinned the phone to his shoulder, crossed to the window, looked out at the storm hammering the glass. What's around you? Anything you can see? A sign, a mile marker, a barn, anything. There's nothing. It's all... There was a green sign that said County Road 9 before I think I'm maybe a few miles past it. County 9. Ethan knew it. Everyone out here knew it. It ran past the old Henderson place and dead-ended at the lake. And in a storm like this, it was the kind of road that killed people, slow, while they waited for a help that didn't know they were there. Okay, listen to me. County 9. You're north of the marker. You're between there and the lake. I know that road. Are you hurt? No, cold. My phone is... I don't have much battery, and there's no... Then don't waste it. Keep your phone off. Stay in the car. Do not get out and try to walk, you hear me? Stay in the car. Run the engine if you... The engine's dead. Everything's dead. That changed the math. A running engine bought hours. A dead one bought maybe 1. In this, before the cold became a real and patient thing. Stay in the car anyway, he said. Wrap up in whatever you've got. I'm coming. 20 minutes, maybe less. Don't fall asleep. You hear me? Don't fall asleep. A pause. Then, smaller than he expected from the voice that had started the call, "Why would you come?" He didn't have an answer for that. It wasn't a question people usually asked. "Because you called," he said, and hung up before she could waste more battery, and turned to find Lily standing at the bottom of the stairs in her shark towel, watching him with the unblinking attention of a child who's figured out that something real is happening. "Daddy, who fell down?" "Nobody fell down. Somebody's stuck in the snow. I'm going to go get them." He was already pulling his boots on, the good ones, the work ones. "You're coming with me. We can't leave you here." Her whole face lit up like he'd announced a trip to the moon. "A rescue?" "A rescue. Get dressed, snow pants, real socks, the whole thing. 2 minutes." She thundered up the stairs, towel flying, and Ethan stood in his small, warm kitchen for 1 second, looking at the storm, doing the thing he always did before he did something hard, which was to picture his wife's face and ask her, silently, the question he'd never get an answer to. "Am I being stupid, Sarah?" The kitchen didn't answer. It never did. But he pulled his coat on anyway. Said, Ethan's truck was 19 years old, and the only thing he'd ever loved that didn't break his heart. A Ford with a plow blade he could drop, a bed full of sandbags for winter weight, and tires he'd bought instead of fixing the dishwasher. It started on the first try, the way it always did, like an old dog that still remembered how to run. Lily climbed up into the booster seat and back, bundled in a snowsuit 2 sizes too big because he kept buying her room to grow. He clicked her in, checked the strap twice, the way he checked everything twice now. "Is the stuck person a kid?" Lily asked. "No, Bug. Grown up." "Are they scared?" He thought about the voice on the phone, the control over the top of the fear. "Yeah," he said. "I think they're real scared. So when we find them, you be nice. People act funny when they're scared. They might be grumpy. Doesn't mean anything. I'm not grumpy when I'm scared. You're a little grumpy." "I'm concerned," Lily said with enormous dignity, and Ethan laughed, the first real laugh of a hard day, and dropped the truck into gear. The snow took the truck better than it would have taken anything else. He kept the speed low, the wipers maxed, the heater roaring, The world outside was a moving wall, and the only thing that kept him oriented was that he'd driven this road 1,000 times. To work, from work, to the gas station, to the cemetery on the second Sunday of every month. His hands knew the curves before his eyes found them. County 9 came up on the right, the green sign nearly buried, just the top corner showing. He turned onto it and felt the difference immediately, the truck wading into snow no one had touched, the plow blade he hadn't dropped pushing a low wave ahead of the bumper. "Watch the right side for me," he told Lily. "Look for red lights. Little blinking red lights." "I'm watching." "Good girl." They crawled north. A mile and a half. The pines closed in. Ethan leaned forward over the wheel, scanning, and a cold thought he didn't say out loud started to take up room in his chest. What if I'm wrong about the road? What if she walked? What if... And then Lily's small voice from the back, sharp with triumph. "Red lights! Daddy! Red lights! There!" And there they were. 2 faint red points pulsing through the snow, low to the ground, almost gone. The silver shape of a car nosed into the ditch, half vanished, snow already drifting up its doors. Ethan eased the truck to a stop, angled to throw his headlights across it, set the brake, and was out the door into the cold before he'd fully decided to be. "Stay in the truck," he called back to Lily. "Lock it. I mean it. Stay put." The wind hit him like a hand. He waded through snow to his knees, reached the car, and through the frosted glass he could see her. A woman in a dark coat, hunched in the driver's seat, arms wrapped around herself, and for one terrible second she didn't move, and his stomach dropped through the floor of the world. He pounded on the glass. Hey, can you hear me?" She jerked upright, turned, and he was looking at a pale, sharp, exhausted face he half recognized from somewhere. A newsletter, a town hall, a photo on a wall, but couldn't place, not yet, not with the cold and the dark, and the snow coming sideways. She fumbled the door. It was frozen at the bottom. He had to haul it, putting his back into it, before it cracked free with a sound like a branch breaking. The cold inside the car was worse than outside, the still trapped kind that gets into a person. "You okay? Can you move? Anything hurt?" "I'm fine." The words came out clipped even through chattering teeth, the reflex of a person who'd never once in her life admitted to being not fine. "I'm fine. It just... the engine. Yeah, I bet. Come on. Can you stand?" "I can stand." She tried. Her legs had gone stiff and stupid with cold, and she pitched forward, and he caught her arm. Through the cashmere he could feel how cold she was, cold all the way down, and steadied her without making a thing of it. "Easy. I got you. We're going to get you in the truck where it's warm. You got a bag? Anything you need?" Yes. The bag. On the seat." He grabbed it, slung it over his shoulder, got an arm around her and half walked, half carried her through the snow to the truck, and the whole way she kept her spine straight and her chin up like she was being escorted into a gala rather than rescued from dying. And somewhere under his worry, Ethan thought, all right, so that's the kind of scared she is. He pulled open the passenger door. The heat rolled out. From the back seat, Lily's voice, hushed and reverent. "Is that the stuck person?" "That's her, Bug. Scoot your stuff over." He got the woman up into the seat. Her hands were shaking. She was trying to hide it, fists clenched in her lap, but he saw it. He reached past her, popped the glove box, pulled out the wool blanket he kept there, the gray one with the hole in the corner, and dropped it over her lap without ceremony. "It smells like dog," he said. "We don't have a dog anymore. I don't know why, it still smells like dog. Just put it on." A sound came out of her that might have been a laugh if she'd had more left in her. She pulled the blanket up. He shut the door, came around, climbed into the driver's seat, and cranked the heat as high as it went. "Okay," he said, to the truck as much as to her. "Okay. We're good. We're good now." In the rearview mirror, Lily was staring at the back of the woman's head with naked fascination. "Hi," Lily said. "I'm Lily. I'm 5. We came to rescue you. My dad's really good at rescues." The woman turned slowly and looked at the child in the back seat. The snowsuit, the gap where she'd lost a front tooth, the absolute openness of a face that had not yet learned to be afraid of anything for long. And something happened to the woman's face that Ethan caught only in profile. A crack. A flicker. There and gone. "Hi, Lily," she said. Her voice came out rough. "Thank you for the rescue." "You're welcome." A beat. "Why are you so cold?" "Lily, it's all right." The woman pulled the dog blanket tighter. "Because I made a bad decision, Lily. I drove somewhere I shouldn't have, in weather I shouldn't have, because I thought I knew better than everyone telling me not to." She said it flatly, almost to herself, and Ethan glanced over because that didn't sound like an answer to a 5-year-old. It sounded like a confession. "That's okay," Lily said generously. "I do that too. One time I jumped off the garage because I thought I could fly." "Did you fly?" "No, I broke my arm. It made a sound." The woman almost smiled. "Then we have something in common." Ethan dropped the truck into gear and pulled a slow, wide arc to turn them back the way they'd come. The plow blade scraped. The headlights swung across the dead silver car, already half buried, and then it was behind them, swallowed by the white. "It's too bad about your car," Lily offered. "It's really fancy. Is it broken forever?" "I don't know," the woman said. "Maybe. Our truck's really old, but it never breaks. Daddy says it's because— What do you say, Daddy?" "I say it's too dumb to know it's old," Ethan said. The woman did laugh then, a small, real thing, surprised out of her, and she pressed the back of one cold hand to her mouth like she wasn't sure she was allowed. It took 25 minutes to get home, double the normal time, the truck crawling and the storm closing in behind them like a door. Nobody talked much. The heater roared. Lily fell into the sudden total sleep of a child past her bedtime, head lolling against the booster seat, and the woman watched her in the side mirror with an expression Ethan couldn't read. "You can sleep too if you want," he said. "We're okay now. I won't put us in the ditch." "I'm fine." "You keep saying that." She didn't answer. Then, after a mile, "I should call someone. A tow. A hotel. I can't just— "Ma'am, there's no tow coming out tonight. There's no hotel between here and the highway that isn't a 40-minute drive in conditions that'll kill you. The plows won't touch County 9 till morning, maybe later." He kept his eyes on the road. "You're going to come to my place. It's warm. We've got a couch that pulls out and a kid who's going to be over the moon about it. In the morning, when it's light and the roads are clear, we'll figure out your car. That's the whole plan. That's it." A long silence. "You don't know me," she said. "You don't know anything about me. You don't know who I am." There was something in the way she said it. Who I am. Like it was a warning. Like she expected him to find out and change his mind. "Nope," he agreed. "Don't need to. You called a stranger from a dead road in a blizzard. That tells me everything I need to know for tonight." "And what's that?" "That you were out of options." He glanced at her. "Everybody's out of options sometimes. Doesn't make you anything, just makes you a person on a Tuesday." She turned to the window. He thought maybe he'd said something wrong, gone too plain, the way Sarah used to tell him he did. "You say the true thing before you check if it's the kind thing, Ethan?" But when the streetlight at the edge of town slid across the glass, he saw her reflection, and her eyes were wet, and she was furious about it, blinking it back, jaw set, like crying was one more system that had failed her tonight. He pretended he hadn't seen. It was the only kindness he knew how to give a stranger who didn't want it. The house was small and yellow-lit and exactly what it was, the home of a man and a child, with no woman in it to make it look like the homes in magazines. Ethan carried Lily in first, asleep, dead weight against his shoulder, and the woman followed with the dog blanket still around her like she'd forgotten she had it. He laid Lily on the couch, peeled her out of the snowsuit with the practiced one-handed economy of a man who'd done it 1,000 times, and the kid didn't wake, just made a small noise and burrowed. Then he straightened and saw the woman standing in the doorway looking at his house, and he saw it the way she must be seeing it. The kitchen table covered in crayons, a half-finished drawing of what was probably a dog, or possibly a horse, or possibly a very confident potato. A pot of soup gone cold on the stove from a dinner half-eaten. A laundry basket of clean clothes he hadn't folded sitting on the armchair where laundry baskets went to die. A child's drawings taped to every available surface, curling at the corners. A wedding photo on the bookshelf, turned slightly away, the way you turn a thing you can't look at directly but can't put away either. It was messy. It was warm. It was lived in the specific way of a life that didn't have enough hands for everything it held. Sorry about the... He gestured vaguely at all of it. It's not usually... It's exactly usually like this, actually. I'm not going to lie to you. It's fine, she said, and this time fine sounded different, softer, like she meant it. You want soup? It's just chicken and rice. It's nothing, but it's hot if I heat it up. He was already moving toward the stove because moving was easier than standing in a room being looked at by a stranger who'd been crying. And coffee or tea. We've got, he checked, we've got the kind of tea that comes in a yellow box. I don't know what it is. My neighbor gave it to me. Tea is fine, thank you. He put the soup on low and filled the kettle, and she stood in the middle of the kitchen not knowing what to do with her hands. This woman in a $3,000 coat in a kitchen with a leaking faucet, and finally she said, is there somewhere I should call my office. Let them know. People will... She stopped. Someone might be looking for me. He doubted it. He couldn't have said why, but he doubted it the way you doubt a thing you recognize. Someone might be looking for me was what people said when they were afraid the answer was no. Phone's by the door if yours is dead, he said. Landline, we're old-fashioned, or there's a charger on the counter. She found the charger, plugged in her phone, stood watching it like it might do something. It buzzed to life, and Ethan, heating soup, his back half turned, saw her face change as the screen filled. Whatever she'd hoped to see, she didn't see it. A couple of notifications, work things. Nothing that said, "Where are you? Are you safe? Come home." She set the phone face down on the counter with a small, precise click and wrapped her arms around herself again. They didn't notice you were gone, he said. He hadn't meant to say it. It just came out, the true thing before the kind thing. She looked at him sharply. He braced for the cold, for the excuse me, for the executive voice he could already tell she had in her back pocket for exactly these moments. But she was too tired. The cold had gone out of her somewhere on the drive, melted by the heater and the dog blanket and the sleeping child on the couch, and what was left underneath was just a person. No, she said, they didn't. He set a bowl of soup in front of her at the cleared-off corner of the crayon table, put a spoon next to it, moved a drawing out of the way, the dog horse potato, and she looked down at it. My daughter made that, he said. It's a dog, I think. We don't have a dog. She wants one. She draws a lot of dogs as, like, a political statement. The woman picked up the drawing, studied it with a seriousness it did not deserve and entirely deserved. It's a good dog, she said. It's an excellent dog. She set it down gently, the way you'd set down something fragile, and picked up the spoon and ate. He watched her take the first bite the way you watch a stray cat decide whether to trust you. The wariness, then the surrender to plain animal need. She was hungrier than she'd admit. She'd probably skipped lunch. People like her always skipped lunch and called it discipline. It's good, she said, surprised again. It's soup. There's no way to mess up soup. You'd be amazed what I can mess up. She said it lightly, but it landed heavy, and she seemed to hear it land and looked back down at the bowl. The kettle screamed. He made the mystery tea. He sat across from her at the crayon table, in his own kitchen, with a strange woman and a sleeping daughter, and a storm sealing them all inside, and for a while neither of them said anything, and the not saying was somehow not uncomfortable, which surprised him too. I'm Ethan, he said finally. Cole. I should have said that an hour ago. Ethan. She turned the name over, set down the spoon, and he watched her arrive at some decision, some line she'd been deciding whether to cross, and cross it. Victoria, she said. Hail. The name went off in the room like a small, quiet bomb. He didn't say anything right away. He was good at not saying things right away, even when the thing wanted out. Victoria Hale. The name on the email. The signature at the bottom of the memo that had gone around the floor that very afternoon. The one that said, workforce optimization and difficult decisions, and valued members of the Iron Veil family in that language they used when they meant you're fired. Victoria Hale, the CEO, 30 years old, never seen below the 30th floor. who'd that very day signed away 300 jobs, maybe his job, he wouldn't know till Monday, and who was now sitting at his kitchen table eating his soup with purple crayon under her exhausted eyes, having been pulled out of a snowbank by one of the people she'd never once thought about as a person. Huh, Ethan said. She watched him, very still, the way you watch to see if the ground is going to give way. You work for Ironvale, she said. It wasn't a question. She'd put it together somewhere on the drive, the area code, the town, the timing. Maybe that was the "you don't know who I am" in the truck. She'd known. She'd known the whole time who she was riding home with, in a way, and she'd let him bring her anyway. Maintenance, he said. 11 years, second shift mostly. I fix the things that break so the things that make money keep making money. He took a sip of the mystery tea. It tasted like grass and lemon. I was on the floor today when the email came around. I know which email. 300 people. 312. That's a real specific number for a thing that means 300 families finding out before Christmas. Her jaw tightened. There it was, the executive surfacing, the armor sliding up. You don't know the financials. You don't know what the alternative was. You don't know what it costs to keep... You're right, Ethan said. I don't. I fix elevators and HVAC and the autoclave in Lab 3 that nobody's replaced since before you were hired. I don't know your numbers. He leaned back. The chair creaked. But I know Danny Ruiz on the loading dock has a kid getting chemo, and the insurance is through the company. I know Brenda in receiving is 59, which is the worst possible age to get laid off, too old to get hired, too young to retire. I know those things because those are the people, and the people are who I see. You see the number. I see who the number is made out of. I'm not saying you're a villain. I'm saying we're looking at the same thing from real different chairs. She didn't answer. She looked down at the soup. The steam had stopped rising from it. You pulled me out of a ditch, she said quietly, to lecture me. No. He shook his head. I pulled you out of a ditch because you called and you were freezing. The lecture's free. You don't have to take it. He stood, gathered his empty bowl. And for what it's worth, I didn't know it was you when I came. You were just a person on a dead road. You're still just a person on a dead road, far as tonight's concerned. The Victoria Hale stuff, he waved it off. That's a Monday problem. Tonight you're a guest who likes the soup. She looked at him for a long moment. Whatever she'd expected, to be screamed at, blamed, used, recorded on someone's phone for the local news. It wasn't this. It wasn't a tired man telling her the truth and then letting it go. Why are you being kind to me? She said, and it came out not as a question but as something closer to despair. When I might have just cost you your job. Ethan stopped at the sink. He thought about Sarah, the way he always did when the real questions came. You say the true thing before you check if it's the kind thing. But sometimes the true thing was the kind thing. Sometimes they were the same thing, and you just had to be tired enough to stop telling them apart. Because being unkind to you wouldn't get my job back, he said. And because there's a sleeping kid on that couch who's going to wake up tomorrow and watch how I treat the stranger we rescued, and she's going to learn what kind of person to be from what she sees me do. Not from what I say, from what I do. He rinsed the bowl. So I'm going to do the thing I'd want her to do, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. That's the whole job. That's parenting. That's the entire thing nobody tells you. In the living room, Lily stirred on the couch, made a small sound, settled. The furnace kicked on with a thunk and a low hum. The storm threw a fistful of snow against the window. Victoria Hale sat very still at a crayon-covered table in a small yellow kitchen, holding a cup of mystery tea, and for the first time in longer than she could measure, longer than Theo, longer than her mother's funeral, longer than the corner office and the title and the silver car now buried in a ditch on County Road 9, she had absolutely no idea what to say. So she said the only true thing she had. Thank you, Ethan. Yeah, he said. Drink your tea. I'll go pull out the couch bed once the kid's down for real. He went to gather Lily, to carry her up to her own bed and free the couch, and Victoria watched the tired man lift his sleeping daughter with a tenderness that was completely unself-conscious, that he didn't know anyone was watching, that he'd have done exactly the same if the room were empty, and something in her chest that had been frozen for a very long time, longer than tonight, longer than she would ever admit to a stranger, made the first small sound of a thing beginning to thaw. Outside, the storm settled in for the night, sealing the little house off from the world, from the company, from Monday, from everything except the warmth of the room and the two strangers in it who did not yet know that the storm had not stranded them at all. It had brought them exactly where they needed to be. If you've made it this far, you already know this story is just getting started. Drop a comment below, telling me what city you're watching from. Hit that like button, and stay with me, because what happens between Victoria, Ethan, and a little girl named Lily over the next 4 nights is going to change all 3 of them forever. The pull-out couch had a bar that ran right under the small of her back, and Victoria Hale, who had slept in hotel suites on 4 continents, lay awake on it for most of the night listening to a furnace she didn't trust and a storm she couldn't see. She told herself she wouldn't sleep at all, and then somewhere past 3 she dropped into it without permission and woke to gray light and a smell she couldn't place for a full disoriented second before her brain supplied it. Coffee and toast, and underneath both of them, the faint sweet scent of a child's shampoo. She lay still under the dog blanket. She'd kept the dog blanket, she realized, even after Ethan had brought down a real comforter, and listened. "You have to be quiet," a small voice was whispering in the kitchen, the loud, catastrophic whisper of a 5-year-old. "The lady's still sleeping. She had a hard day. She broke her car." "I know, Bug. That's why we're being quiet." "We're being so quiet. We're being incredibly quiet. You just yelled the word quiet." "I whispered it." A clatter of a spoon, the scrape of a chair. Victoria kept her eyes closed and felt something she had no name for, lying there eavesdropping on a morning that wasn't hers, in a house that wasn't hers, listening to a father and a daughter negotiate the volume of love. She'd grown up in a quiet house. Her mother had been quiet the way a held breath is quiet. Her father had been quiet the way a closed door is quiet. There had been no whispering about other people's hard days. There had been her bedroom and her books and the long, careful study of how not to need anything from anyone, a discipline she'd been so good at that she'd graduated valedictorian in it and then gone pro. She sat up. The couch bar released her spine with a click. "She's awake," Lily announced, abandoning the whisper entirely. "Good morning. You slept for 100 hours. Daddy made toast. Do you want toast? You can have the corner piece. It's the best piece. I'm giving it to you, and that's a big deal." "Lily," Ethan said from the stove, "let her wake up before you give her your whole heart." But Victoria was already smiling, helplessly, before she'd even decided to. "I would love the corner piece," she said. "Thank you. I know it's a big deal." The storm hadn't broken. It had only paused to gather itself. Through the kitchen window, the world was a flat, white nothing. The snow still coming, the truck in the driveway already buried again past its wheel wells. Ethan had checked his phone, then the radio, then the window. In that order, 3 times, with the resignation of a man reading a verdict he already knew. "County's not going to touch the roads till this lets up," he said, setting a plate in front of her. Toast, eggs, the corner piece pointedly on top. "And it's not letting up. They're saying tonight, maybe tomorrow. So," he shrugged. "You're stuck with us another day. Sorry." "Don't apologize." She picked up the corner piece. Lily watched her eat it with the intensity of a girl who needed to confirm the gift had landed. Victoria made a show of it. "This is the best corner piece I've ever had." "Told you," Lily said, vindicated, and went back to her own breakfast, which she was eating in a system involving eating all the egg first and saving the toast as a reward for finishing the egg, narrating the strategy as she went. Ethan poured coffee, slid a mug across. "I called the dealership, left a message. I called a tow guy I know, Pete. He laughed at me and hung up. Nobody's coming today. Your car's going to be fine where it is. It's not going anywhere. Nobody's going to steal a dead car off County 9 in a blizzard." He sat. "Your office?" She'd called them last night, finally, before the couch bed. A 2-minute call to Dorothy, her assistant, who'd been alarmed and efficient and had offered to send a helicopter, actually said the word helicopter. And Victoria had said no, absolutely not. She was fine. She was safe. She'd be back when the roads opened. Dorothy had wanted details. Victoria had given her none. "I'm at a colleague's house." The most truthful lie she'd ever told. "They know I'm alive," she said. "That's all they need." Ethan looked at her a beat too long over his coffee, and she had the unsettling sense that he heard the things she wasn't saying, the way he'd heard it last night. They didn't notice you were gone. He had a way of doing that, this maintenance technician, this man who fixed autoclaves, of catching the broken thing under the thing that looked fine. It was probably what made him good at his job. It was deeply inconvenient as a house guest. Okay, was all he said. Then today's just a day. Power's holding, for now. We've got food. You're warm. He stood, rinsed his mug. I gotta go shovel a path to the woodpile before this gets worse, in case we lose power and need the fireplace. Lily, you stay in and keep our guest company. Don't show her every single drawing. I'm gonna show her some drawings. Some is fine. He pulled on his coat and his boots and went out into the white, and Victoria watched him through the window. The steady, unhurried way he moved, throwing snow off the path in even arcs, a man who'd done this 1,000 winters and would do it 1,000 more. And then a small, warm body climbed onto the couch beside her with a shoebox. These are my drawings, Lily said. Daddy said some, but I'm going to show you the whole box, and we're not going to tell him. Our secret, Victoria agreed. But she would think later that the drawings were where it happened. Not the rescue, not the soup, the drawings. Lily narrated each one with total commitment. This was a dog. This was also a dog, a different dog. You could tell because this one was orange. This was Daddy. See, the big arms. Daddy has the biggest arms in the whole world. This was the truck. This was Lily herself, with a crown, because she had been a princess that day. This was a lady with very yellow hair and a long pause here, and then quieter. That's my mom. Victoria went still. The drawing was a stick figure with an enormous scribbled sun of yellow hair, standing next to a smaller stick figure that was clearly Lily, the two of them holding hands, a row of crooked flowers at their feet. It was the careful, deliberate work of a child who had drawn this picture many times. She's in heaven, Lily said, with the matter-of-fact theology of the very young. Or, Daddy says we don't know exactly where, but somewhere good. I don't remember her. I was a baby. But Daddy tells me things so I can know her, like she could whistle really loud, and she hated mushrooms, and she sang in the car bad on purpose to make Daddy laugh. She studied her own drawing. I draw her with yellow hair because Daddy says it was yellow like mine. So when I draw me and her, we match. Victoria looked at the picture and found, to her own complete astonishment, that her throat had closed. She did not cry. She had not cried in front of another human being since the funeral, and she had barely cried then, had stood at the front of that quiet room in a black dress, doing the math on her mother's estate, because the math was something she could control and grief was not. But she sat on a stranger's pull-out couch, holding a 5-year-old's drawing of a dead woman with yellow hair, and she had to look hard at the window, at the snow, at anything, until the pressure behind her eyes agreed to stand down. She sounds like she was wonderful, Victoria managed. She was the best one, Lily said simply, and put the drawing back in the box, and pulled out the next one. This is a dinosaur eating a smaller dinosaur. It's nature. And just like that, the moment passed, the way moments only do with children, who feel things completely and then move on completely, who don't know yet that adults carry every moment forward, stacked on all the others, until they can barely stand up under the weight of them. The power went out at 2:14 in the afternoon. Victoria knew the exact time because she'd been looking at her phone, scrolling through the emails she couldn't answer, because she'd decided with a recklessness that felt almost physical not to answer them. The lights flickered, surged, and died. The furnace's hum stopped. The refrigerator went quiet. The house dropped instantly into the particular silence of a powerless winter afternoon, just the wind and the tick of cooling pipes. There it is, Ethan called from the other room, unsurprised. Okay, fireplace it is. Lily, you know the drill. Blankets to the living room. Victoria. It was the first time he'd used her first name, and they both noticed it, and neither said anything. You want to be useful, or you want to be a guest? No wrong answer. Useful, she said, and was surprised by how fast it came. He set her to work. It was the first time in 14 months that anyone had handed Victoria Hale a task that wasn't a decision worth millions of dollars, and she found it almost unbearably relieving. She carried wood. She held the flashlight while he got the fire going, and he was bad at it. The kindling kept dying, and he swore under his breath, and she said, "You're smothering it. It needs air." And he said, "Oh, you're a fire expert now." And she said, "I read a lot." And he laughed and gave her the matches, and she got it lit on the second try, building the little structure the way a book had once told her, and the flame caught and held and climbed, and she sat back on her heels feeling a pride so disproportionate to the achievement that she almost laughed at herself. "Huh," Ethan said, echoing his own word from the night before. The CEO can build a fire. The CEO can do a lot of things nobody asks her to do anymore. It came out sharper and sadder than she'd meant. He didn't pounce on it. He just nodded like she'd handed him another piece of the thing he was quietly assembling about her, and fed a bigger log into the flames. They made an indoor camp of it. Ethan dragged the couch cushions to the floor in front of the fire. He heated soup on a camp stove he kept in the garage for exactly this, and it was the same chicken and rice soup as last night, and Victoria ate 2 bowls and didn't pretend she wasn't hungry. Lily declared it an adventure and built a fort out of blankets and chairs and insisted Victoria come inside it, and Victoria, in slacks that had cost more than Ethan's monthly mortgage payment, she'd later realize, crawled into a blanket fort lit by a flashlight and listened to a 5-year-old explain the fort's rules, which were extensive and changed constantly. It got dark early, the way it does in December, the white window going gray, then black, the fire the only light. And in the firelight, with Lily finally winding down, drowsy and heavy-limbed and leaning against Victoria's side as if she'd known her all her life, the walls came down. Not all at once. Victoria Hale didn't do anything all at once. It started with Ethan asking, not prying, just curious in the way of a man with hours to fill and a fire to feed. "So how's somebody get to be CEO of a place like Ironvale at 30? That's young for that." And she told him. She didn't plan to. She told him about the 80-hour weeks and the business school and the 3 companies before this one where she'd made herself indispensable and then made herself feared because feared was safer than liked. You couldn't be betrayed by people who were afraid of you. She told him about the board that had hired her precisely because she was young and hungry and would cut what the older men were too sentimental to cut. She told him she'd known, taking the job, that she was being hired as a weapon, and she'd taken it anyway, because being a weapon was at least being something. They needed someone who could do the hard things, she said, watching the fire. That's the polite version. What they meant was they needed someone who didn't have anything else. No family they had to get home to. No... She stopped. Someone who'd be at the office at 9 on a Friday night because there was nothing else to be at. That's who you hire to do the cutting, someone with nothing to cut into. That's a hell of a thing to know about yourself and say out loud, Ethan said. I've never said it out loud before. Why now? She looked at him across the firelight, this tired, honest, imperfect man who'd argued with her about layoffs and then given her his daughter's corner piece of toast. Because you're a stranger, she said. Because the power's out and there's no record of this conversation, and tomorrow the road's open and I go back to being the person who signs the papers and you go back to being the person who fixes what breaks, and we never talk about this again. It's the safest conversation I've ever had. Nobody can use it against me. There's nothing to gain by lying to you. That's bleak. It's honest. Can be both. He stirred the fire. For the record, I'm not going to use it against you, even Monday, even if the email's got my name on it. She believed him. That was the strange part. She'd spent her whole life in rooms full of people whose every word was a move in a game, and she sat on a floor with a man she believed completely, and it terrified her more than the ditch had. Boy, Lily had fallen asleep against her, and Victoria didn't move, didn't want to move, sat with the weight of the sleeping child against her ribs and the fire warm on her face, and felt, in some buried compartment, the thing she'd spent 14 months and 3 companies and a lifetime not feeling. Can I ask you something? Ethan said, and you can tell me to mind my business. You've earned a question. Today, the list, the 312. He kept his eyes on the fire, giving her the privacy of not being looked at. Did you ever, even once, sit with it? Not the spreadsheet, the thing. 300 Christmases. Did you let yourself feel that, even for a second, before you signed? The honest answer was no. The honest answer was that she had trained herself, deliberately, professionally, over years, not to feel that, Because feeling that was how you froze, and a frozen executive was a fired executive, and a fired executive was nobody, was her father's idea of a daughter who'd stopped being worth calling. She had made herself a person who could sign 312 names and go home to sparkling water and not feel it, and she had been proud of that, had thought of it as strength. "No," she said. "Why not?" "Because if I felt every one of them, I couldn't do the job." She heard how it sounded. "And the job pays for... The job is the only thing I..." She stopped, started again, slower. "Marcus, my CFO, he says it every time. You did the right thing. It's never easy. But you did the right thing, and I used to believe him. Today I signed it, and he said it, and I looked out the window at the snow, and I thought..." Her voice did something it had never done in a boardroom. "I thought, what if it's not the right thing? What if it's just the easy thing wearing the right thing's clothes? What if I've been doing the easy thing my whole career and calling it courage because the easy thing happened to be the cruel thing, and being able to be cruel made me feel strong?" The fire popped. Lily breathed slow and even against her. "That's why I got in the car," Victoria said. "I couldn't be in that building one more minute being the person who'd just done that. I thought I'd drive to the lake house and be alone, and it would feel like control instead of like running. And then the car died, and I called a stranger, and the stranger turned out to be exactly one of the people I'd signed away, and he pulled me out of the snow anyway and gave me soup and let his daughter give me the corner piece, and I have been sitting here all day thinking," she pressed her lips together, "thinking that you, with your truck that's too dumb to know it's old and your kid drawing dogs as a political statement, in this house with the leaking faucet, that you have something I have spent 14 years and every dollar I've ever earned failing to get anywhere near." Ethan was quiet for a long moment. The fire threw his shadow up the wall, large and steady. "It's not magic," he said finally. "What we've got. It's not... You make it sound like a thing you missed a turn for and now it's too late. It's not that." He nodded at his sleeping daughter against her side. "It's that mostly. It's somebody who needs you so much you don't get to be frozen. You can't. There's a kid who needs her teeth brushed and her fears talked down at 2 a.m., and her dog drawings taken seriously, and she does not care that you're tired or sad, or that you buried her mother, and some days you can barely stand up. She needs you anyway. And you find out you can do it. You find out you're warmer than you thought, because somebody made you be." He poked the fire. "I was frozen too. After Sarah, I don't talk about it, but there was a year I don't really remember, where if it had been just me, I don't know that I'd have..." He stopped. "But it wasn't just me. There was a baby who needed feeding every 3 hours and didn't care how I felt about it, and that baby thawed me out 1 3 a.m. feeding at a time. So when you say I've got something you don't, I want you to hear me. I didn't get it because I'm good. I got it because I had to, because somebody made me." Victoria looked down at the child asleep against her, this small, heavy, warm, trusting weight, and understood, with a clarity that hurt, that for the length of one snowbound afternoon, someone had made her too. "She fell asleep on me," she said softly. "She doesn't even know me." "Kids know things we forget how to know," Ethan said. "She knew you needed somebody to fall asleep on, so she did it." He stood, stretched, his back cracking. "I'll take her up. You don't have to move. Just slide her over." But Victoria didn't want to slide her over. She wanted, with an intensity that frightened her, to keep holding the sleeping child for one more minute, to stay frozen in this one unfrozen moment. And the wanting was so foreign and so total that she had to clear her throat and say, "No, take her. She should be in her bed," in a voice that came out almost steady. He lifted Lily off her, and the warm weight left Victoria's side, and the cold came back into the space it left, and she pulled the dog blanket up and watched the man carry his daughter up the dark stairs by flashlight, and she sat alone in front of the fire in a stranger's living room, and finally, quietly, without sound, let herself cry for the 312, and for the man with the chemo kid, and for Brenda who was 59, and for the yellow-haired woman who'd hated mushrooms and sung badly on purpose, and for the little girl who matched her hair to a mother she didn't remember. And last and least and most, in a hot, ashamed trickle she'd have denied to her grave, for herself. When Ethan came back down, she'd wiped her face and composed it. He pretended again not to notice, And she understood now that this was the kindest thing about him, the not noticing, the leaving people the dignity of their privacy. "There's more soup," he said, "and the fire'll hold all night if we feed it. I'll take first watch on it. You should sleep." "I'm not tired." "You're exhausted. You just don't know what it feels like because you usually drown it in coffee." He sat back down. "But you don't have to sleep. You can keep me company. Fire's better with two people watching it." So she stayed up and they watched the fire, and she asked him about Sarah, and he told her, carefully, the good parts, the way she whistled, the terrible singing, the way she'd wanted a daughter so badly and gotten exactly 4 months with her before the thing in her blood that no one had caught in time took her in a hospital room while Ethan held a newborn in the hallway because they wouldn't let the baby in. He told it plainly, without the literary varnish people put on grief, and it was worse for being plain, and Victoria listened to all of it without once trying to fix it or minimize it or move past it, which she would have done with anyone else, because moving past things was her whole skill set. "I'm not telling you this for sympathy," he said. "I'm telling you because you told me your true thing, and it's only fair. It's the saddest thing I've ever heard. It's the saddest thing that ever happened to me, but it's not the saddest thing about my life." He looked at the stairs Lily had gone up. "The saddest thing it'd be if I let it make me into a man who couldn't love anybody else, ever, because I was too scared of losing them too. That'd be the real tragedy. Sarah dying was just terrible luck and bad blood. Me deciding to die along with her, slow, over 30 years, just stay frozen and call it being faithful, that'd be a choice. And she'd have hated me for it." Victoria thought about the man named Theo, about you decided a long time ago that needing things was a weakness, and now you can't turn it off. And she thought that Ethan Cole, maintenance technician, had just described her own life back to her using his dead wife as the example, and had no idea he'd done it. "How do you turn it off?" she said. "The frozen. How do you decide not to be that? You don't decide once. You decide every day. Some days you decide wrong." He fed a log to the fire. "But you've got an advantage I didn't have. You found out it's in you, today. You held a sleeping kid and built a fire and cried about 300 people you've never met. That's not nothing, Victoria. A frozen person can't do those things. So now you know. You can't unknow it. You can pretend Monday, but you'll know you're pretending. That's the worst part of thawing. You don't get to go back to comfortable numb. You just get to be the person who knows what they're not feeling." She sat with that for a long time, the fire dying down and Ethan building it back up, the storm beginning, finally, somewhere in the deep middle of the night, to break. "The roads will be open tomorrow," she said. It wasn't quite a question. "Probably. Afternoon, if the plows run. And I'll go back. You'll go back." She looked at the fire. "I don't want to go back to who I was Friday." "Then don't," Ethan said, as if it were that simple, knowing it wasn't, saying it anyway because someone had to. "You're the CEO. You're the one who signs the papers, so sign different papers." He shrugged, that same unhurried shrug. "I fix what breaks." You can fix what breaks too. You've just got a bigger thing to fix, and you've been using your wrench on the wrong bolt." He almost smiled. "That's the most maintenance guy thing I'll ever say to you. Hold on to it. It's wisdom." She did laugh then, tired and real, and outside the wind dropped for the first time in 2 days, and in the sudden relative quiet they could hear, far off, the low grinding rumble of a county plow finally venturing out onto the roads, scraping its way through the dark toward morning, toward the world starting up again, toward Monday. Victoria pulled the dog blanket around her shoulders and did not say what she was thinking, which was that she did not want the plow to reach them, that she wanted the snow to keep them sealed in this warm, imperfect house forever, away from the boardroom and the spreadsheet and the man who would say you did the right thing, and that wanting it, this much, after one day, was either the most foolish thing she'd ever felt or the first true thing, and she genuinely could not tell which, and for once in her life she let herself not know. The fire burned low and warm. The plow ground closer through the dark. And the two of them sat watching the flames, not talking now, just keeping the fire, while upstairs a little girl with yellow hair slept the sleep of a child who did not yet know that anything in her small, warm world was about to change at all. The plow reached them a little before noon, and the world started up again whether Victoria wanted it to or not. A tow truck followed an hour later, Pete himself behind the wheel, no longer laughing, hauling the dead silver car out of the ditch on County 9 with a winch and a great deal of profanity. Victoria stood in Ethan's driveway in her ruined leather boots, watching her old life get dragged back into the picture, and she felt the way you feel when a vacation ends, except worse, because this hadn't been a vacation. It had been the first 2 days of her real life, and now they were over. Lily had cried when Dorothy's hired car finally arrived. Not a tantrum. Worse, a quiet leaking grief, clinging to Victoria's leg, asking when she was coming back. And Victoria, who could face down a hostile board without blinking, had not known what to do with a 5-year-old's honest sorrow. She'd crouched down. She'd said, "soon," and meant to make it a kind lie, and heard it come out of her mouth as a promise. "You don't make promises to kids you can't keep," Ethan had said, low, after Lily ran inside. Not angry, just true, the way he was always just true. "I know. So which is it? The kind lie or the promise?" She'd looked at him standing in the doorway of the house that had thawed her, and she'd said, "I don't know yet, but I'm not going to lie to her. So it has to be the promise. I just don't know how to keep it from in there." She'd nodded at nothing, at the city, at Monday. "But I'm going to try." "That'll do," Ethan had said, and then because he was who he was, "Go fix the wrong bolt." She'd carried that all the way back to the city. Go fix the wrong bolt. 65 miles of plowed highway with her phone lit up like a slot machine, 91 emails, 11 missed calls, Marcus Pell's name appearing over and over, and the whole drive she'd held onto the warm, absurd image of a man with a plow blade and a leaking faucet telling the CEO of a billion-dollar company that she'd been using her wrench on the wrong bolt. By the time the car pulled into the underground garage at Ironvale, she knew what she was going to do. She just didn't yet know what it was going to cost. The boardroom on the 41st floor had a name. They'd named it after a dead founder, and it had a 40-foot table of black walnut and a view of the whole frozen city. And Victoria had won a dozen brutal fights in that room without losing her composure once. She walked into it Monday morning with snow melt still ruining her boots and a folder under her arm that no one had asked her to bring. Marcus Pell was already there. So were the others, the operating chiefs, the heads of the divisions, and at the far end, by video and in person, the board. Walter Brennan, the chairman, 81 years old and sharp as a knife, who'd run 3 companies into legends and 1 into the ground, and would tell you the difference was luck if he were honest, which he never was. Diana Chebe, from the investment group that held the largest block of shares, who'd flown in overnight, which meant the investors were nervous, which meant teeth. 2 others on the screen, faces lit blue. "Glad you survived the wilderness," Walter said dryly. "We were taking bets." "I'm touched. Let's get to it." Marcus had the floor before she'd sat down, sliding a thin deck across the walnut. "While you were stranded, the Q4 prelims firmed up. They're worse than projected. The Duluth fab numbers came in. The contract with Meridian fell through over the weekend. Well, they went with an overseas supplier, and frankly, Victoria, the 312 we approved Friday isn't going to be enough." He let that land. "The board's modeling says we need to go deeper. Another 400, maybe more. Close Duluth entirely, consolidate everything to the main campus, and run lean through the recovery." 700 people, Victoria said. 712, Marcus said, and she almost laughed at the precision of it, the same precision she'd used Friday, the spreadsheet exactness that turned a slaughter into an accounting entry. Diana Chebe leaned forward. "The market's already pricing in a restructuring. If we move decisively, the stock stabilizes, our position holds, everyone's protected. If we hesitate, if we look soft, the slide continues and we're having a much worse conversation in 90 days. The kind where none of us are in these chairs." She had a pleasant voice. People with the most teeth usually did. "We hired you to make the hard calls, Victoria. This is the hard call. We're behind you. Make it." And there it was. The whole machine, purring, waiting for her to do the thing she'd been hired to do. The weapon they'd loaded 14 months ago now pointed exactly where they wanted it. A week ago, she'd have made the call. She'd have made it Friday, twice over, and gone home to the sparkling water and felt the cold pride of having done the hard thing. She opened her folder instead. "No," she said. The room didn't react at first. They thought they'd misheard. Marcus actually smiled, a confused little reflex. "Sorry?" "No. We're not cutting another 400 people. We're not cutting another 40. We're not closing Duluth." She laid the first page flat on the walnut. She'd worked on it in the car, on her phone, in the back seat, in handwriting because she hadn't trusted herself to type it. "I've spent the last 72 hours doing something I've never done in this job, which is sitting in the actual life of someone we were about to fire. So before anyone tells me again that this is the hard call, I want to be clear about what the hard call actually is, because I don't think it's the one you're describing." "Victoria," Walter started, with the gentle warning tone of a man who'd watched 100 careers end in this room. "Let me finish. You can fire me when I'm done. You probably will." She kept going. "The plan on the table protects the stock and the shareholders and everyone at this table. It does it by taking everything from the people with the least and nothing from the people with the most. 700 families lose their income before the holidays so that the share price holds and our positions stay comfortable. That's not the hard call. That's the easy call, wearing a hard call suit. The hard call is the one where it costs us something. So here's mine." She turned the page so they could see it. "Executive compensation gets cut first, top to bottom. I'm taking a 40% reduction in my own salary, effective immediately, in writing today. Every officer at this table takes a graduated cut. The more you make, the more you give back through the recovery, restored only when the company's restored. That alone closes a third of the gap Marcus is so worried about." Marcus had stopped smiling. "The corporate jet lease, we don't renew it. The naming rights deal on the arena downtown, $18 million over 6 years for a logo nobody asked for. We kill it, we eat the cancellation fee, it's still cheaper than 700 severances, and it doesn't end with anyone's kid losing their insurance. The Meridian contract didn't fall through because our people failed. It fell through because we underbid ourselves chasing margin. So we renegotiate. In person, I'll go myself. And if I can't save it, I'll find 2 more like it. Because that's supposed to be my actual job, growing this thing, not just amputating it." She set down a third page. "Duluth stays open. It's running at a loss because we starved it of the capital to modernize and then blamed it for being inefficient. We invest instead of close. Slower payback, real payback, and 300 people in a town that has nothing else keep their houses." The room was dead silent now. The blue faces on the screen had gone still. "Some cuts still happen," Victoria said. "I'm not pretending we're whole. There's redundancy, there's roles we genuinely don't need, and I won't lie to anyone and call a layoff a hiring freeze. But it's a fraction of 700. It's done with real severance and real notice and real help finding the next thing, and it starts with us, not with them. That's the plan. That's the hard call. The other one was just the cheap one." Nobody spoke. Outside, the city lay white and silent 41 floors down. Then Walter Brennan began, very slowly, to laugh. It was not a kind laugh. "Well," he said, taking off his glasses, polishing them on a handkerchief with the unhurried theater of a man who'd ended people before and enjoyed it. 40% of your own salary. That's quite a gesture, very moving. The kind of thing that plays beautifully in a press release and bankrupts a company in 18 months. He put the glasses back on. "Diane, you flew all night. Tell our CEO what the shareholders think of executives who decide, 2 days before Christmas, to discover their conscience." Diana Chebe didn't smile this time. "Victoria, I respect passion, but you serve the shareholders. That's the job. It's not a moral position, it's a fiduciary one. It's the law. You can't take a 40% haircut on leadership compensation and tank the executive team's retention right when we need stability, and you can't sink capital into a failing fab on a feeling. If you do this and it fails, and it will, you're not a martyr. You're just the person who blew up everyone's retirement so you could feel good about yourself." She let it sit. "Where is this coming from? Last Friday you signed the 312 without blinking. Now you've had a long weekend in the snow and suddenly you're, what, different?" "Yes," Victoria said, "different. That's not a strategy, that's a breakdown." And here was the moment. She felt it the way she'd felt the engine die on County 9, the sense of something giving way under her, of the road running out. She could back down. She could say, "You're right, I overreacted. Here's the 700. Let's move on." And she would keep the office and the title and the silver car and the cold pride, and she would go home tonight to the sparkling water knowing she'd done the easy thing again and called it sense. They were handing her the off-ramp. All she had to do was take it. She thought about a drawing of a yellow-haired woman holding hands with a smaller figure, a row of crooked flowers at their feet. "Maybe it is a breakdown," she said. "Maybe that's exactly what it is. I broke down on a road in a blizzard, and a man I'd never met drove through it to pull me out, and he had every reason to leave me there because the email I signed Friday had his coworkers' names on it, maybe his own. I still don't know. And he didn't leave me. He took me home and fed me soup and let his 5-year-old give me the best piece of toast, and he sat up all night feeding a fire so I wouldn't be cold." She looked around the table at the men and women who'd never once been cold in their lives. "He fixes broken machines for a living, 11 years. He earns in a year what this room spends on lunch in a month, and he is a better leader than every single person at this table, including me, because he knows the one thing none of us will say out loud, which is that the numbers are made out of people, and when you forget that, you don't get more efficient. You get cruel, and then you get cruel efficiently, and you put it in a deck, and you call it the hard call." "Spare us the parable," Walter said, but there was less in it now. "It's not a parable. It's the most useful management lesson I've ever gotten, and I got it from a man with a plow blade." She didn't sit down. "Here's what I think you're all missing, because you're looking at the same thing I used to look at. You think compassion is the soft option, and the cuts are the disciplined one. You've got it backwards. Anyone can fire 700 people. It takes no skill. A spreadsheet can do it. What takes actual leadership, what's actually hard, is finding the version where the company survives and you don't gut the town of Duluth to do it. That's harder. It requires more of us. It requires us to be smarter and to give something up and to take a personal loss instead of pushing the whole loss downhill onto the people who can least afford it. The cuts aren't brave. The cuts are lazy. I was lazy on Friday. I'm not going to be lazy today." "And if you're wrong," Diane said, "if the numbers don't work, and we're back here in 2 quarters with a worse problem and a smaller cushion?" "Then fire me," Victoria said simply. "Fire me and bring in someone who'll do the 700, and at least I'll have spent my last quarter in this chair trying to do it right instead of doing it easy. But I don't think I'm wrong. I think the math works if we're willing to be the ones who bleed first. I ran it 3 times. It's all in the folder. It's tighter than Marcus's. It's just less comfortable because it asks something of us." She finally placed both hands flat on the walnut and leaned in. "You hired me to make the hard call. Fine. I'm making it. You just don't like that the hard call turned out to be hard on you." The fight lasted 4 hours. It was not clean and it was not noble, and at several points it was simply ugly. Men and women who controlled enormous sums of money arguing about a few percentage points as if the percentage points were not also human beings with mortgages. Marcus tried, twice, to move the conversation back to the 700 as though Victoria's plan were a tantrum they could wait out. Walter alternated between paternal patience and cold threat, deploying both with the ease of long practice. Diane ran the numbers against Victoria's numbers and found, to her visible irritation, that Victoria's numbers held not perfectly, not without risk, but they held. And a plan that held was a plan that couldn't simply be dismissed. Victoria did not win by being inspiring. She won, in the end, the way she'd always won, by being relentless and by having done her homework, except this time the homework served something other than the share price. She'd modeled the executive cuts down to the dollar. She'd found the cancellation clause in the Arena deal. She'd already, on the drive in, sent a quiet email to the head of the Duluth fab asking for the modernization figures the company had been ignoring for 2 years, and they were sitting in the folder, and they were good. Around hour 3, something shifted. It was Diane. Of all people. She'd been hammering the retention risk. Executives who took a 40% cut would walk to competitors. And Victoria had said flatly, "Then let them walk. An officer who will abandon this company over 1 hard year was going to abandon it eventually anyway. I'd rather find out now and replace them with someone who'll stay." And Diane had stopped and looked at her for a long moment, and something in her hard, pleasant face had recalculated. "You'd really take the 40%, she said. In writing. Today. Personally. I've already drafted it. It's signed. It takes effect whether or not you approve the rest of the plan. Victoria slid one more page across the walnut. I'm not asking anyone to do anything I haven't already done to myself. That's the difference between this and Friday. On Friday, I signed away other people. Today, I signed away myself first. If the plan fails, I lose the most, because I make the most, and I've cut the most. That's not a breakdown, Diane. That's the only honest version of leadership I've ever found, and I found it by accident in a house that smelled like soup. Diane looked at the signed page. She was a shrewd woman, and shrewd women recognize eventually that a leader who will cut themselves first is a leader worth more than the discount on their salary. That the market, which Diane understood better than anyone in the room, would read it not as weakness, but as the rarest thing a company can offer, which is a reason to be believed. The optics, Diane said slowly, if we frame it right, a leadership team that took the loss to save the workforce. That's not a weakness story. That's a trust story. That's the kind of thing that's worth more than the 18 million arena logo we were buying for exactly that reason and getting nothing for. She set the page down. Walter, I think we should hear the rest of it, properly, not as a tantrum, as a plan. Walter Brennan looked at Diane and at Victoria and at the city out the window, and he was old enough and smart enough to read a room that had turned. He did not like it. He had wanted the 700 because the 700 was simple and he was 81 and tired of complicated. But he had not run 3 companies into legends by failing to notice when the wind changed. I think the plan is a mistake, he said. I want that in the minutes. I think we're indulging a young CEO's crisis of conscience and calling it strategy. He paused. But I've been wrong before, and the numbers, God help me, the numbers hold more or less. So, he looked at Victoria with something that was not quite respect and not quite contempt, the look of an old predator acknowledging a younger one. You get your plan, you get 1 quarter. If Duluth doesn't turn, if the renegotiations fail, if the executive team walks, you don't get a second meeting. You get a press release announcing your departure to spend more time on your conscience. Are we clear? We're clear. Then let's stop talking and start cutting our own throats first, since that's apparently the new strategy. He stood, joints creaking, and on his way out he said the thing that told Victoria she'd actually won. Nothing. He said nothing at all, which from Walter Brennan was the highest praise available, a withholding of the dismissal he'd been so ready to deliver 4 hours earlier. The room emptied slowly. Marcus lingered, gathering his deck, the one with the 712, the one that was now dead. He looked at Victoria across the walnut, and for the first time in 14 months, she saw something other than condescension in his face. You did a real foolish thing today, he said. You made enemies you didn't need to make. Walter won't forget it. Diane came around, but she'll be watching you like a hawk now, waiting for the numbers to slip. You bet your whole career on a feeling. I know. I used to say you did the right thing, every time. Did you ever notice I only said it when it was the cheap thing? He almost smiled, an old man's tired smile. I think I said it so I'd believe it. 40 years of saying it so I'd believe it. He tucked the dead deck under his arm. I don't know if your plan works, Victoria. I really don't. But it's the first time since I've known you that you signed something and looked like it cost you. So, he shrugged, an echo of a shrug she'd seen on a very different man in a very different room. Maybe that's worth something. Maybe it's just expensive. We'll know in 90 days. He left. And Victoria Hale stood alone in the named boardroom on the 41st floor, with the signed page reducing her own salary by 40%, sitting on the black walnut, with the city white and silent below, with her career hanging by a thread she'd cut herself, and she did not feel the cold pride she'd always felt after winning in this room. She felt afraid. And under the fear, for the first time in years, she felt awake. She took out her phone. She had 93 emails now, and she ignored all of them. She opened a new message instead, to a number she'd saved Sunday night under a name that wasn't a name, just County 9. And she stood at the window looking at the frozen city she'd just gambled her whole life to be slightly less cruel to. And she typed and deleted and typed again because she did not know how to do this, had never learned, had spent 14 years making sure she'd never have to. In the end, she kept it simple. "I fixed the wrong bolt today," she wrote. "Or I tried to. It might cost me everything. I'm not sorry. Tell Lily I kept the promise. I'd like to keep keeping it if that's allowed." She looked at it for a long time, her thumb over the send button. This woman who had just stared down a board without flinching, now terrified of a text message to a maintenance technician 65 miles north. Then she thought about a fire someone had fed all night so she wouldn't be cold. And she pressed send, and she put the phone face up on the walnut this time, not face down, and she waited to see if anyone was looking for her at all. He texted back 40 minutes later, and the 40 minutes were the longest of her professional life. Longer than the 4 hours in the boardroom, because the boardroom she understood, and this she did not. "Lily says you have to come for real this time, not soon. She drew you a dog. It's orange, and yeah, it's allowed." Then a minute after, "For what it's worth, and I don't know what it's worth, I fix elevators. I think you fixed the right bolt. Sounds like it cost what right bolts cost." She read it standing at the walnut table and laughed, once, out loud in the empty boardroom, a sound that surprised her so much she put her hand over her mouth. Dorothy, passing in the hall, glanced in alarmed, having never in 14 months heard the CEO laugh at her own phone. That was the Monday. The weeks after the Monday were where Victoria found out what the boardroom had only threatened, that doing the right bolt didn't end with a vote. The vote was where it started. The executive cuts went out in writing the next morning, her own first, and 2 officers resigned within the week exactly as Diane had predicted, and Victoria let them go and did not chase them, and replaced one of them with a woman 2 levels down who'd been overlooked for years and who turned out, given the chance, to be twice the leader the man she replaced had been. The arena deal got killed. The cancellation made a small, ugly story in the business pages for a day. The Meridian renegotiation she did herself flew out and sat across a table and did the thing she was supposedly good at, and saved 60% of the contract and replaced the rest within a month with 2 new ones she'd hustled personally, working the phones like she hadn't since she was 26 and hungry, and remembering, with something like grief, that she used to love this part, the building, before someone taught her that cutting was the real work and building was just decoration. Duluth was the hard one. Duluth didn't turn in a quarter the way Walter wanted. Modernization didn't work like that. But it turned enough. The early numbers came in better than the model, and 300 people in a town that had nothing else kept their houses. And Victoria flew up there once, unannounced, in February, and walked the floor of the Fab in a hard hat and saw the line running and met a few of the people whose names had been on a list, and shook their hands and did not tell them they'd nearly been a number on a spreadsheet, because some things you carry so other people don't have to. The board watched her like a hawk, exactly as Marcus had warned. Every slip got scrutinized. Walter Brennan never warmed to her, never forgave her for being right about a thing he'd been wrong about, and she came to understand that some men would rather be disappointed than corrected. But the company stopped sliding, slowly. The stock found a floor and then, against every prediction in that room, began to climb. Not on the cuts the board had wanted, but on the trust story Diane had spotted, the rare and marketable fact of a company whose leaders had bled first. Diane, watching her numbers hold quarter over quarter, became something Victoria hadn't expected and didn't entirely trust. An ally. But that was the office. That was the part Victoria knew how to fight. The other part, the orange dog, the promise, the house that smelled like soup. She did not know how to fight, because it wasn't a fight, and everything she'd ever learned was about fighting. She went back on a Sunday, the second Sunday after the storm, because she'd told Lily she would, and because she couldn't stop thinking about a man feeding a fire. She brought cookies. She'd actually gone to a bakery, the CEO of Iron Veil Systems standing in line at a bakery on a Sunday morning like a person, and she'd stared at the case for a long time, not knowing what a 5-year-old liked, and bought too many of everything, and felt, paying for them, a flutter of nerves entirely disproportionate to a box of cookies. Lily opened the door before Ethan could, and screamed so loudly that Ethan came running thinking something was wrong. And what was wrong was that Victoria Hale was standing on the porch holding a white bakery box, and Lily attached herself to Victoria's legs with the force of a small linebacker. "You came for real, not soon, for real, Daddy. She came for real." "I see that, Bug. Let her in the door before you knock her over." The cookies were a triumph and a disaster. Lily ate 3 before lunch and was briefly, gloriously unmanageable. And Ethan gave Victoria a look over the kid's sugar-fueled head that said rookie mistake and thank you at the same time. And Victoria, who managed billion-dollar crises, discovered she had no defense whatsoever against a 5-year-old on a sugar high, and laughed until her stomach hurt watching Lily try to teach her a dance that had no discernible steps. It was not smooth. None of it was smooth. She came back the next Sunday and the one after, and somewhere in there the Sundays stopped needing a reason. She was bad at it at first, genuinely bad, in ways that surprised her. She didn't know how to just be in a house. She'd arrive and immediately try to be useful, to do something, to fix or organize or improve, because sitting still in someone's living room with no agenda was a skill she'd never developed. And Ethan caught her one afternoon alphabetizing his bookshelf and said, not unkindly, "Hey, you don't have to earn being here. You can just be here." "I don't know how to just be anywhere." "I know. I can tell. Sit down. Watch the kid draw. That's the whole activity. There's no deliverable." So she learned to sit. She learned slowly, badly, to be somewhere without trying to optimize it. She'd sit at the crayon table while Lily drew and narrated, and she'd ask the wrong questions and Lily would correct her with great patience. And Ethan would cook something simple, and the 3 of them would eat it. And Victoria would drive the 65 miles back to the glass apartment with the sparkling water and lie awake thinking that the smallest house she'd ever been in held more than her entire downtown life. But it wasn't smooth, and the not smooth part was Ethan. Because Ethan, it turned out, was scared. Not of her. Of what she was becoming to them. He'd watched his daughter fall in love with this woman in about 11 minutes flat. And he was the one who'd be left holding Lily when Victoria's real life, the boardroom life, the 41st floor life, eventually pulled her back where she belonged, and a man who'd already buried one woman his daughter loved was not in a hurry to set up a second loss. It came out in March, on a Sunday when the snow had started its slow, rotten retreat, and the world was all mud and gray. Lily was down for a nap, finally, after fighting it, and Victoria was washing the lunch dishes. She'd gotten good at finding the small ways to be useful that weren't about earning anything. And Ethan was drying, and the quiet between them had been good, easy, until he broke it. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to not give me the boardroom answer." She set down the plate. "Okay. What is this?" He kept drying the same dry glass. "You driving up here every Sunday. The cookies. Lily's got a drawer now. She made a drawer in her dresser. She calls it the Victoria drawer. It's got the dog drawings she's saving for you and a rock she thinks you'll like. She talks about you to the kids at school. She told her teacher she has a..." He stopped, his jaw working. "She told her teacher she has a mom now. The teacher called me, gently, to check." Victoria's hands had gone still in the soapy water. "So I need to know what this is," Ethan said. "Because I can survive a lot. I've survived the worst thing there is, but I can't survive watching that kid lose somebody else she decided to love. I won't put her through it. So if you're slumming, if this is something where the rich lady discovered poor people are real and warm and authentic, and it's good for your soul for a few months until it's not, I need you to tell me now, and stop coming, and I'll explain it to her somehow, and we'll be okay. We were okay before." He finally put the glass down. "But I have to know, because she made a drawer." It was the most words she'd ever heard him say at once, and every one of them was afraid. And Victoria stood at his sink with her hands in dishwater, understanding that he was not being cruel. He was being a father. He was doing the exact thing he'd told her about on the night of the fire. He was refusing to be frozen, and the cost of not being frozen was that you had to risk it all every single time, and he'd decided to risk it on her, and it was killing him. "I'm not slumming," she said. "Then what?" "I don't know." She made herself say it. The true thing before the safe thing, the way he'd taught her without knowing he was teaching her. "I don't know what this is, Ethan, because I've never had it. I have never in my whole life had a place I wanted to drive 65 miles to on my one day off. I've never had a kid make me a drawer. I've never..." Her voice did the thing it had done in front of the fire, the thing it never did in boardrooms. "I have never been somewhere that I didn't want to leave. I drive back to the city every Sunday night, and the apartment feels like a hotel room I've been living in for 2 years. This feels like, this is the only place that feels like anything. So I can't tell you what it is because I don't have a word for a thing I've never had. But I can tell you it's not slumming. I can tell you I'm more myself washing your dishes than I am running a company. And I can tell you I would never, ever make that little girl a promise I plan to break. Because I told you in the driveway that day, I don't lie to kids. I'd rather lose everything than be one more person who taught her that love is a thing that leaves. Ethan looked at her for a long time. The faucet dripped, the same faucet, still leaking. He'd never fixed it, and she'd come to love the sound of it. You said you'd lose everything, he said quietly. You already did that. At work. You bet your whole career on a feeling. Diane the hawk and old Walter who hates you and the whole thing. He shook his head slowly. You're not careful, are you? People think you're this careful calculating, and you're the least careful person I've ever met. You jump off the garage because you think you can fly. I broke my arm, she said, an echo. It made a sound, and he laughed, surprised, his guard cracking, and she pressed into the crack because she'd learned that too, relentlessness, except now it served something. I'm scared too, Ethan. I'm not scared of the same thing you are. You're scared I'll leave. I'm scared you'll be right not to trust me. I'm scared I'll do the cold thing without even noticing, that it's so deep in me I'll hurt her and not even feel it happen, the way I signed 300 people away and felt nothing. That's what I'm scared of, that I'm broken in a way that doesn't get fixed by a few good Sundays. You're not broken, he said. You were frozen. There's a difference. Broken doesn't thaw. You're thawing. I've watched it happen for 3 months. You're slow and you're bad at it and you alphabetized my books, but you're thawing. He picked the glass back up, started drying it again, an excuse to look at his hands instead of her. I don't have an answer for what this is either. I haven't let anybody near her since Sarah. Or near me. It's not like there's been nobody, women I'd see for a while, and then I'd feel them getting close to Lily, and I'd end it every time because I couldn't risk her. You're the first one I haven't ended it with. And I keep waiting to feel the thing that makes me end it, the thing that says protect her, this one's gonna hurt her, and it's not coming. That's what scares me. It's not coming, and I don't know if that means you're safe or if it means I've lost my judgment. Maybe it means you're thawing too, she said. He looked at her. You told me you decide every day not to be frozen, she said. And some days you decide wrong. Maybe we're both deciding. Every Sunday. And we don't know if we're deciding right. Nobody does. You said that. You said you don't get to decide once. She dried her hands on the towel he was holding, which put her hands near his, and neither of them moved away. I'm not going to promise you I won't hurt her, because I don't think you can promise that to anyone, ever. You couldn't even promise it to Sarah. The worst hurt came from something nobody could have stopped. But I can promise you I'll decide every day on purpose to be the kind of person who doesn't. And when I get it wrong, I'll know it and I'll fix it, because apparently, a small wet laugh, apparently that's the whole job. You told me that the first night, from what you do, not what you say. She learns it from what we do. The faucet dripped. Upstairs, Lily's nap creaks and shifts. Ethan Cole, who had built his whole careful rebuilt life around the principle of never again, stood in his kitchen with a dry glass in his hand and a woman he could not make himself send away. And he did the bravest thing he'd done since he'd carried a newborn out of a hospital where he'd left his wife, which was that he reached out and took her hand, properly, deliberately, his rough fixer's hand around her cold, careful one, and held it, and said nothing, because for once the true thing didn't need words. It didn't fix everything. That wasn't how either of them worked, and the story of the spring was not a montage of perfect Sundays. There was the Sunday she got an emergency call from Diane mid-afternoon and had to take it in the truck for an hour, while Lily waited inside getting hurt and confused, and Ethan got quiet and cold in a way that scared her worse than yelling, and she had to drive back the next night, a Monday, unheard of, to sit with Lily and explain that sometimes grown-up jobs were stupid and pulled you away, and it wasn't because you didn't want to be there, and Lily had said, Mom does that, casually, devastatingly, having promoted Victoria without telling anyone. And Victoria had to leave the room to get herself together. There was the Sunday Ethan pushed her too hard about the company. The old argument, you're still the person who signs the papers. Some people still got cut. Don't think you're a hero. And she'd snapped back that she knew exactly who got cut. She carried every name. Did he think it was easy? Did he think a 40% pay cut and a board that wanted her gone was the easy choice? And they'd had their first real fight, ugly and unfair on both sides. And she'd driven home furious, and he'd called at midnight, which he never did, and said, "I was wrong to say the hero thing. I know what it cost you." And she'd said, "I was wrong to throw the pay cut in your face like a receipt." And they'd sat on the phone not talking, 65 miles apart, both of them too proud and too tired and too far gone to hang up. There was the grief, his, that surfaced at strange times, a song, a smell, the anniversary in April that she didn't know about until she found him out on the sagging dock at the lake-adjacent edge of his property, in the cold, alone, and didn't say anything, just sat down next to him on the wet wood in her good coat and stayed, the way he'd stayed when she cried, the not-fixing kind of staying she'd learned from him. And after a long time, he said, "Today's the day she died." And Victoria said, "I know now, I'm sorry, I'm here." And he said, "I know you are. That's the strange part. You're here." And they watched the gray water until it got dark. It was not smooth. It was two damaged people circling something neither of them trusted, deciding badly, daily, on purpose, to keep circling closer instead of running. He kept waiting for the instinct to protect Lily, to tell him to end it, and it kept not coming. She kept waiting to feel the cold thing rise up and ruin it, and it kept thawing instead. Neither of them said the word for what it was, because the word was too big and they were both cowards about exactly one thing each, and their one thing was the same thing. But Victoria kept showing up. That was the whole of it, in the end. Not perfectly. Not smoothly. She showed up late sometimes, and tired and bad at it, and once or twice she showed up and got it wrong and had to come back and get it right. But she kept showing up, every Sunday, and then more than Sundays, 65 muddy thawing miles each way, to a small house with a leaking faucet and an orange dog drawing in a drawer with her name on it, and a little girl who'd quietly decided the matter long before the adults caught up, and a man who was learning, against all his careful judgment, to stop deciding to send her away. On the last cold Sunday of the spring, with the snow finally gone for good, and the lake unfrozen, and the first stubborn green pushing up through the mud, Lily handed Victoria a new drawing without ceremony. 3 figures this time. A big one with enormous arms, a small one with a crown, and a third one, tall, with dark hair, holding the small one's hand, and at the bottom, in the wobbling, careful letters of a kid who'd just learned to write them, 3 words. "It's us," Lily explained, as if it were obvious, as if it had always been true and the adults were simply slow. "I made you the tall one. I gave you a crown too, but a smaller one because Daddy already has the big arms, so you can't have everything." She studied her own work, satisfied. "You can put it in your drawer, the one at your house. Do you have a drawer for me at your house?" And Victoria Hale, who 2 seasons ago had signed 312 names without feeling a thing, stood in a small, thawing house holding a child's drawing of a family that included her, and discovered there was no version of herself, frozen or thawed, that could have prepared her for how much it would undo her to be drawn. "I do now," she said. "I'm going to make one tonight." She made the drawer that night, and that small act turned out to be the thing that broke something open in her, the way the smallest things always are. She got back to the glass apartment past 10, the drawing of the 3 figures riding shotgun on the passenger seat the whole 65 miles like a person she was driving home. And she stood in the middle of her enormous, beautiful, empty living room and looked at it the way she'd looked at Ethan's house that first night, seeing it for what it was. The cleaning service's vacuum line still in the carpet, the bottle of wine she never opened, the sparkling water, a $2,000 sofa nobody had ever fallen asleep on, 40 floors of view, and not one thing in the whole place that loved her or needed her or had ever, once, been spilled on by a child. She went to the dresser in her bedroom, the one with the built-in everything, walnut like the boardroom table, and she opened the second drawer down and took out the folded silk things she kept there and moved them somewhere else. And she lined the empty drawer with a clean dish towel, and she put the drawing in it, flat, careful, the 3 figures and the wobbling letters. And then she stood there with her hand on the open drawer for a long time. It was empty except for the one drawing. A drawer for a child, in the apartment of a woman who'd built her whole life around needing no one. And it held one piece of paper, and she could not stop looking at it. And she realized she was crying again, the way she'd started being able to cry sometime over the winter, quietly, without permission, the frozen thing in her chest having melted enough that the water had somewhere to go now. She'd spent 30 years believing that the way you survived was by needing nothing. That need was the crack through which everything got in and ruined you. That her mother's quiet had been weakness and her father's distance had been strength, and the only safe place to stand was the high, cold place where nothing could reach you. She had been so good at it. She had been valedictorian of it. And it had taken a dead car on a frozen road and a man too stubborn to leave her there, and a 5-year-old who gave away the best piece of toast to show her that she'd had it exactly backwards her whole life. That the high, cold place wasn't safety, it was just a slower way of dying, the 30-year version of the choice Ethan had refused to make after Sarah. She closed the drawer. She left it closed maybe a minute. Then she opened it again just to look at the drawing because she could, because it was hers now, because somebody had drawn her into a family and she got to keep the proof in a drawer. The spring turned warm and then properly warm, the lake fully open, the mud dried to dust, and the rhythm of the Sundays had become the spine of Victoria's whole life without her ever deciding it should. The company held. More than held. The trust story Diane had spotted in the boardroom kept paying out, quarter after quarter, in ways the 700 layoffs never would have. People stayed, the good ones, because a company whose leaders had bled first was a company worth betting your career on, and the recruiting got easier, and the Duluth fab modernized, started winning contracts on quality that the old starved version could never have touched. Walter Brennan retired in May. He didn't say it had anything to do with her, and it probably didn't. 81 was 81. But at his last board meeting, he'd looked down the walnut table at Victoria and said, dry as ever, "I still think you got lucky, you know. Right answer, wrong reasons. Sentiment that happened to pencil out." And Victoria had said, "Maybe. But I'd rather be the kind of lucky where the sentiment pencils out than the kind where it doesn't. And I did it anyway and called it discipline." And the old man had almost smiled, the closest he ever came, and said, "You'll do," which from Walter Brennan was practically a love letter. And then he was gone, and Diane took the chair, and the company that had nearly cannibalized itself the winter before was, by summer, something Victoria was no longer ashamed to run. She'd stopped, somewhere in there, being the person everyone feared in the elevators. It hadn't been a strategy, she'd just thawed, and a thawed person can't keep the cold up, it leaks, and the people on the floors below the 40th noticed that the CEO had started taking the regular elevator sometimes, had learned the name of the man who ran the loading dock and asked about his kid's treatment, had shown up in Duluth in a hard hat with no press around. The fear didn't vanish all at once. Reputations have inertia. But it eroded week by week into something closer to respect, and respect, she was learning, was a thing you could actually live inside, unlike fear, which had only ever been a wall she'd hidden behind so no one could see there was nobody home. Ethan never let her get too pleased with herself about it. "You're still the boss," he'd say, when she told him about some small good thing she'd done at work, some kindness she was a little too proud of. "Don't go thinking you're a saint because you stopped being a jerk. The bar was on the floor. You stepped over a bar that was on the floor. Good for you. Want a medal? You're the least supportive partner a person could have. I'm extremely supportive. I'm supporting you in not becoming insufferable. That's the hardest support there is." And she'd throw the dish towel at him, the same towel, and Lily would shriek with delight at the grown-ups being silly, and it would dissolve into the easy noise of a house with people in it, and Victoria would think every time that she'd traded the fear of 1,000 employees for the affectionate disrespect of one maintenance technician and a 5-year-old, and it was the best trade she'd ever made. He still wasn't smooth about any of it. That was the thing she'd come to understand about Ethan Cole. He was never going to be a man who said the soft, easy thing. He'd told her the truth about herself the first night. They didn't notice you were gone, before he'd checked whether it was kind, and he never stopped doing it, and it had become, strangely, the thing she trusted most about him. In a life full of people who told her what she wanted to hear because she signed their checks, he was the one person who'd tell her she was being insufferable. And she'd married that quality before she'd married anything else about him, in the sense that she'd come to need it the way you need a true mirror after a lifetime of flattering ones. The grief didn't go away. She'd learned not to expect it to. There were still bad days for Ethan, Days when Sarah was suddenly, sharply present, and Victoria had learned to recognize them now. A particular quiet, a heaviness in how he moved. And she'd learned the only thing to do was stay, not fix, just stay, the lesson he'd taught her without meaning to. There was a Sunday in June when Lily, going through a phase of questions, asked at the dinner table plainly, "Is Victoria going to die too, like Mom?" And the room went silent, and Ethan's fork stopped, and Victoria saw the fear flash across his face, the old fear, the one that had made him end things with every woman before her. She'd put her own fork down. She'd looked at Lily, who deserved a real answer, who'd learned from her father that you don't lie to kids. "Someday," Victoria had said. "Everybody dies someday, Lily. I'm not going to lie to you about that because your dad doesn't lie to you, and I'm not going to either." Ethan had gone very still. "But not for a long, long time, I hope. And here's the thing I figured out that took me a really long time to figure out, longer than it should have." She'd chosen the words carefully because they mattered, because a child was listening and a man was listening, and they were the two people in the world she most did not want to get this wrong for. Your mom died, and that was the worst thing. And it's okay that it still hurts, but your dad found out something. He found out that loving somebody who's gone doesn't use up all the love. It's not like a glass of milk where if you spill it, it's gone. It's more like... She'd looked at the kitchen, at the warm, imperfect room. It's more like a fire. You can light another one from it, and the first one doesn't go out. Loving you and your dad doesn't mean your mom gets loved any less. It just means there's more fire. That's all. There's just more of it now. Lily had considered this with the gravity of a 5-year-old weighing a large idea. "So there's enough fire for everybody?" "There's enough fire for everybody," Victoria had said. And Ethan had gotten up from the table and gone to the sink and run the water, his back to them. And Victoria had let him have the privacy of it, the not noticing that was the only kindness she knew how to give him when he was undone, the kindness she'd learned from him. And when he came back, his eyes were red, and he didn't say anything about it. And neither did she. And Lily had moved on to whether dogs go to the same place as moms, and the moment had passed the way moments do with children, leaving its mark only on the adults. Later that night, after Lily was down, he'd found Victoria on the porch and said, "The fire thing, where'd you get that?" "From you. The first night. You fed the fire all night so I wouldn't be cold, and you told me you thawed out 1-3 a.m., feeding at a time. I've been carrying it around for 6 months. It just came out." It was the right thing to say to her. It was the true thing. They turned out to be the same thing. You taught me that too. He'd been quiet a while, and then he'd said the thing that told her the last of his fear had finally let go, the instinct that had been waiting all spring to tell him to protect Lily and send Victoria away, the one that had never come. "I stopped waiting," he said, "for the feeling. The one that says end it, protect her, this one's going to hurt her. I figured out it's not coming because there's nothing to protect her from. You're not the thing I was scared of. You're the thing I was scared of losing." He'd shaken his head, an embarrassed man not used to saying soft things. "That's a hell of a thing to figure out on a Tuesday in June. Took me 6 months. I'm slow." "You're slow," she'd agreed. "I alphabetized your books. You took 6 months to notice you weren't afraid of me. We're both terrible at this. We're getting less terrible." "We're getting less terrible," she'd said, and that was as close as either of them came, that summer, to saying the word. And it was enough because they'd both spent their lives learning that the word mattered less than the showing up, and they were both finally showing up. The breakthrough, the real one, the one that ended the long, careful circling, came on a quiet evening in early July, in the kitchen, with Lily coloring at the table nearby. There was no storm this time. That was the thing Victoria would think about afterward, the symmetry of it. It had taken a blizzard to strand her into the beginning of this, and it took nothing at all. A perfectly ordinary warm evening with the windows open and the leaking faucet dripping and a kid coloring a dog to finish it. She was at the stove. She'd learned to cook a little badly, and Ethan had stopped hovering and let her ruin things sometimes, which was its own kind of intimacy, being allowed to fail in someone's kitchen. He was leaning against the counter drinking a beer, watching her stir something that might or might not become dinner, and Lily was narrating her drawing under her breath the way she did, And the evening was so ordinary that Victoria almost missed the fact that it was the happiest she had ever been. "Can I tell you something?" she said, not turning around because some things you can only say to a stove. "Something I've never told anybody." "Yeah. Before the storm, before any of this." She kept stirring. "I was lost. I don't mean I was unhappy. I knew I was unhappy. That's not a secret. Anybody could have seen it. I mean, I was lost in a way I didn't have words for. I had everything I'd spent my whole life trying to get. The title, the money, the corner office, my father's grudging, whatever it was, the thing I'd been chasing since I was a kid trying to be worth his attention. I got all of it. And I'd sit in that apartment on a Friday night with a bottle of wine I never opened, and I would think, this is it. This is the top of the mountain. This is what I climbed for. And I felt nothing. Worse than nothing. I felt like I'd disappeared, like there was a successful woman walking around running a company, and inside her there was just nobody. An empty office with the lights on so it looks like somebody's working late." The faucet dripped, lily-colored. "I'd been lost for years, Ethan. Not weeks. Years. So lost I forgot it was possible to be found. I thought that empty feeling was just what being an adult was, what being successful cost, the price of the title. I built a whole personality out of not needing anything because needing things had hurt, and the not needing felt like strength. And I got so good at it that by 30 I'd needed nothing for so long that I'd become nothing. A person who needs nothing isn't strong. She's just empty with good posture." She finally turned around, the spoon still in her hand, dripping onto the floor she didn't notice. "And then my car died on a road I had no business being on, and I called a number I didn't know, and a tired man drove through a blizzard to pull me out. And he had every reason to leave me, and he didn't, and he gave me soup, and his daughter gave me the best piece of toast. And I sat in a house that smelled like soup with a fire somebody else was keeping so I wouldn't be cold. And for the first time in years, I wasn't lost. I didn't know where I was. Some house on County 9, the home of a man I'd nearly fired, but I wasn't lost. There's a difference. I'd forgotten there was a difference." Ethan had put the beer down. He wasn't drinking it anymore. "It took one storm," Victoria said. 30 years of being lost. And it took one storm and one stranger who didn't leave. I keep thinking about how close it was. If you hadn't picked up the phone, if you'd been the kind of man who lets an unknown number go to voicemail, which would have been completely reasonable, you'd been dodging calls all week. If Pete the tow guy had actually come out that night, if the storm had broken 6 hours earlier, any of it, any single piece of it goes differently, and I'm still up in that apartment with the wine I never opened, lost, with the lights on so it looks like somebody's home." Her voice caught. "I almost didn't get found. The whole thing turned on a man deciding to pick up a phone." "You'd have found your way eventually," Ethan said, but quietly, not sure he believed it. "No." She shook her head. "That's the lie people tell about lost. You'd have found your way. Some people don't. Some people stay lost their whole lives and die in apartments with the lights on. I was on track to be one of them. I wasn't going to find my way, Ethan, because I didn't even know I was lost. You can't find your way out of a place you don't know you're in. I needed somebody to come get me." That's the thing nobody wants to admit, the thing I'd built my whole life around denying. Sometimes you can't save yourself. Sometimes you need somebody to drive through the storm. And the only thing you can do, the only thing in your whole power, is pick up the phone when it rings and not let the call go to voicemail. That's it. That's the whole of it. You picked up the phone. From the table, without looking up from her dog, Lily said, "Daddy always picks up, even when it's the dentist." And it broke them both, the kid's flat, perfect interruption, and they laughed, the kind of laughing that's halfway to crying. And Ethan crossed the kitchen and took the dripping spoon out of Victoria's hand and set it down and put his arms around her, the rough fixer's arms, and held her. And over her shoulder he could see his daughter coloring, and Victoria could feel the whole warm, imperfect, ordinary weight of the life she'd nearly missed. And for a long moment neither of them said anything because there was nothing left that needed saying. "I was lost too," Ethan said finally, into her hair. "After Sarah. I keep letting you think you're the only one who got found. I was lost for a year I don't remember, and then for years after that I wasn't lost exactly, I was just frozen. Functioning frozen, going through the days. I had Lily, so I had a reason to get up. But I decided, real quiet, without admitting it, that the loving part of my life was over, that I'd had my one and it was done, and now I was just a guy raising a kid and keeping the machines running until it was over. He pulled back enough to look at her. And then a CEO broke down on County 9, and I drove out to do a decent thing for a stranger, and I brought home the person who'd thaw me out. We saved each other, and we were both too proud to notice we were drowning. That's the part that gets me. We were both going under, both pretending we were fine, both of us experts at fine. I'm fine. You said it 9 times that first night. I've said it 9,000 times since Sarah, and it took crashing into each other to find out neither of us had been fine in years. We're terrible at being fine. We're the worst. But we're getting less terrible, Lily supplied, from the table, having clearly been listening to everything the way kids always are. And the grown-ups lost it again. And Lily looked up, pleased with herself, and held up her drawing. Look, I made the fire one. The one with enough fire for everybody. See, there's the big fire, and then little fires coming off it, and that's Mom's fire, and it doesn't go out, and these are the new fires, and they're all, she counted, they're all still on. None of them went out. Victoria walked over and crouched down by the table and looked at the drawing, the central scribbled fire and the smaller ones branching off it, the careful, childish theology of a 5-year-old who'd taken a metaphor and made it true in crayon. And she said, "It's the best fire I've ever seen, Lily." "Better than the corner piece of toast?" "Tied with the corner piece of toast. That's the highest one," Lily said, satisfied, knowing exactly what the corner piece meant, and went back to coloring. And Victoria stayed crouched there by the table for a moment longer than she needed to, just being in it, just being somewhere she didn't want to leave. They didn't get married that summer, or that fall. That would have been too smooth, and nothing about them was smooth. They circled it the way they circled everything, badly, slowly, on purpose. And there were more fights and more bad Sundays and a stretch in August where the distance, the 65 miles and the 2 lives, got hard enough that they almost didn't make it, and a long, ugly conversation about whether Victoria could really do this, really build a life 65 miles from a job that had eaten every other person who'd held it, and whether Ethan could really let a woman with that much money and that much power into a house where he'd always been the one who provided, modestly, with a 19-year-old truck, and his pride about it was real and stupid and human, and they had to work through all of it the hard way, because there was no easy way, there never had been with them. But by the following winter, a year, almost exactly, from the storm, Victoria had bought a different car, an unglamorous one with all-wheel drive and a real emergency kit in the trunk, because she'd learned her lesson about Minnesota roads, and she drove it up County 9 in the first real snow of the season, and she didn't go to the glass apartment afterward. She'd given up the glass apartment in October. She kept a small place in the city for the night she had to be there for work, but the house on County 9 was where she lived now, the small one, with the leaking faucet she'd finally made Ethan fix and then missed the sound of so much he'd had to unfix it, with the Victoria drawer that had filled up with a year of drawings, with the wedding photo of Sarah on the bookshelf that Victoria had quietly turned to face out again, because she'd decided early on that she wasn't going to be a woman who needed a dead one hidden, that there was enough fire for everybody, and that included the first fire, the one that didn't go out. She'd taken a 40% pay cut and gambled her career and lost her place in the elevators where people feared her, and she'd never, not once in the year that followed, regretted any of it, because she'd traded an empty office with the lights on for a full house with a leaking faucet, and anyone who'd ever stood in both kinds of rooms knew which one was worth more. On the anniversary of the storm, a quiet evening, snow falling soft outside the windows, no blizzard this time, just the gentle, ordinary winter kind, the 3 of them were in the kitchen. Lily, 6 now and reading, was at the table doing homework she insisted on doing herself, narrating it under her breath. Ethan was at the stove, making the chicken and rice soup, the same soup, the only soup, because some things you don't improve. And Victoria was setting the table, 3 places, in the warm, imperfect house that had pulled her in out of the cold a year before and never let her get cold again. 1 year ago tonight, Ethan said, stirring, not turning around. I know. You were in a ditch on County 9 telling me you were fine. I was extremely fine. I had a half a bottle of slushy water and 3% battery. I had it completely handled. You were dying with great posture. Empty with good posture, she corrected. Dying came later, if you hadn't picked up. He turned around then, the wooden spoon in his hand, and looked at her across the small kitchen, this woman he'd pulled out of the snow and somehow ended up building a life with. Neither of them smooth, neither of them perfect, both of them stubborn and damaged and slow and getting year by year a little less terrible at the only thing that had ever mattered. I'm glad I picked up, he said. I'm glad you don't let calls go to voicemail. Even the dentist, Lily said, without looking up from her homework, and the grown-ups smiled at each other over the head of the child who'd been the bridge between them all along, who decided the whole thing in 11 minutes the first night and waited with great patience for the adults to catch up. They ate the soup at the table with 3 places set, the snow falling soft outside, the wedding photo facing out from the bookshelf, the Victoria drawer full down the hall, the leaking faucet dripping its small, steady rhythm. It was not a perfect family, and it was not a perfect house, and they were not perfect people. There would be more fights, there would be bad days and grief that surfaced at strange times, and the long, ongoing work of 2 guarded people learning to stay unguarded. None of it was finished. That was the thing Victoria had finally understood, the lesson that had cost her a frozen career and a frozen heart to learn, that you don't get found once. You get found the way you decide not to be frozen. Every day, on purpose, knowing some days you'll get it wrong, and showing up anyway. But on this night, the 1-year night, with the soup steaming and the kid reading and the snow coming down soft on the road that had nearly killed her and instead delivered her home, Victoria Hale sat in the warm, imperfect house that had first brought them together. And she was not lost, and she had not been lost in a year, and she knew now what she had not known for the first 30 years of her life. That the people who seem the most found, the most successful, the most in control, are very often the most lost of all, walking around in expensive coats with the lights on inside so no one can see there's nobody home. And that being found is not something you achieve. It's something that happens to you, usually by accident, usually through someone else, usually when you've run out of options on a frozen road and you do the one brave thing left in your power, which is to admit you can't save yourself and call and pray a stranger picks up. Somebody picked up. That was the whole story. On the worst night of a long-lost year, a tired man with a 19-year-old truck and a sleeping daughter picked up a call from a number he didn't know and drove out into a storm he had every reason to stay home from, to save a woman who'd done nothing to deserve it, because she'd called, and that was enough. That had always been enough. Sometimes the people most lost in life only need one storm to finally find where they belong. And outside, the snow kept falling, soft and patient, on the little house where 3 people who had each been frozen in their own separate winters sat together in the warm, eating soup found.